and that is one of the voices of the Cincinnati Bengals, Dave Lapham, former Cincinnati Bengal. What do you think of the Bengals this year? I mean, got off to the slow start. They're now 3-3. Joe Burrow is a great young quarterback. Jamar Chase might be the best young receiver in the game. There's some really good players on the other side of the ball as well. I'm a big fan of Cam Taylor-Britt, Hubbard and Hendrickson off the edges. DJ Reader's a load in the middle. Give me your thoughts on this Bengal team. They're 3-3 and at the bottom of the division, but everybody's kind of closely grouped, and there's a lot of football left.
You're right, Larry, and really, Joe Burrow, the first month of the season, the first 4 weeks of the season, he was medically impaired with that calf injury. I mean, he was a statue, and that's not Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is a very, very mobile quarterback in terms of in the pocket, climbing the pocket, slide stepping, all those kind of things. He buys time and extends and creates plays by buying that time. And then that's not to mention out-of-pocket stuff with bootlegs, waggles, nakeds, all those kind of – that was out. None of that could happen. He was a quarterback that was in the shotgun and stationary, and he was, just a statue. So every defensive lineman didn't even have to worry about keeping contained. They just beeline to that spot. It was tough protecting. So Joe was trying to get the ball out of his hand extremely quickly as a result of that. He's only been under center 7 snaps this year. And last year he was under center 200 snaps. Right now he's tracking for 21 snaps under center for the season. Well, it couldn't go under center because he couldn't reverse pivot, do everything you need to do short space wise with that calf problem. So like I said, he was this stationary statue. So now that was the first 4 games. The last 2 he was a little more mobile, and he started to move and extend. On third down and in the red zone, every quarterback in the NFL moves, extends, creates, and they make plays to keep drives alive and to, make 4-point plays, score touchdowns, not settle for field goals in the red zone. And Joe is as good as anybody at it. Now, the hope is that he'll be able to start doing that again for the 11 games remaining. And it's 11 one-game seasons. And because he's really, really something else when he's out there extending and creating. And Jamar Chase, who you talked about, they've been, working together for a long time. And they have that mental telepathy, ESP, when they kind of read each other's minds, what they're doing when they are extending and creating plays. And so it'll be interesting to see how much better the offense does perform now that, they've got the Joe Burrow that can do a lot of things. The coaching staff had to melt the game plan down. They'd spent the offseason, all these tweaks and different things that they were going to do. Well, a lot of it went away because Joe was so limited. So now maybe after the bye, some of it will be reindoctrinated, and they may do some things against the 49ers and others that they haven't shown in the first 6 weeks of the season because, honestly, the first 6 weeks of the season was very elementary. There wasn't much sexiness to their game plans, that's for sure.
Well, let's talk about the O-line. You probably see it clear as a former O-lineman. I really like some of the players on this line and even some of the backups. I mean, Zeus Brown comes in. He's the left tackle. Jonah Williams was a left tackle. He's now on the right side. This team cut Lael Collins, which was a surprise to me, but I really kind of like Deontay Smith, the East Carolina kid who's a backup. Mm-hmm. How's this line played? Because, you look at those numbers and the numbers aren't good. I mean, the Bengals are 28th in the league in points per game. How much of that was the injury to Burrow? They're 32nd in total offense. They're 31st in rushing offense. How is the line opening holes for the backs, and how would you describe this Bengal O-line?
I think they've been challenged because, like we talked about, Joe is stationary in terms of in the pocket, and then they knew he had to get the ball out of his hand quickly because of the pass rush. If you have a decent pass rush, and they played against teams, like Cleveland, like Baltimore, like the Rams with Aaron Donald, that can rush the passer. So what teams were doing is they're on first down of the game, they're playing like it's a low red zone. They got everybody within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, one safety deep, because they know the Bengals aren't going to have time to throw the ball deep. And so then it's tougher to run the football too. The box is loaded, everything's crowded. So I think with Joe Burrow's health being much better and being able to threaten all quadrants of the football field, I think that maybe it might be a little bit easier to run the football. And honestly, what they have to do is finish blocks better, no matter what the schematic is that's being called or whatever the situation is, still finish blocks. And if they finish blocks better, and if the backs make the first guy miss a little bit more than they have, the running game should improve. But I think it's going to loosen up a little bit with a healthier Joe Burrow for them to be able to run the football a little bit better.
Dave, you played the game, so I'm so glad that we have you here because there's a major rest advantage in this game. 49ers are off a short week, played Monday night in Minneapolis, got on the bird, flew back, have had very little time to prepare. They're limping somewhat into their bye week, having lost a couple in a row. The Bengals, on the other hand, are coming off their bye week, have had 13 days to prepare for this game. How much, as a guy who's played the game and has gone through the process of pro football, how much of an advantage is it to have that level of preparation advantage on your opponent?
Yeah, I think I was my year there wasn't any bye week. I would have loved to have been part of that. There's no doubt about it. But I do think that getting away for a bye to rest your body and your mind, just to kind of get away from it, I think there's something to that. And my understanding is that the practices have been really good since they came back from the bye. So everybody seems to be rejuvenated in that regard. I do think, I know the coaches got away. They worked, the players were off from Monday all the way through the entire bye week until the following Monday. They basically had a week off. The coaches worked like through Wednesday, Thursday on the 49ers and then put it away. And then they introduced the game plan to the players like a normal week this past week. It'll be very interesting. All I can say is, though, my experience tells me the way the 49ers played the first 5 weeks of the season, you better go into San Francisco. Then they've lost 2 in a row, granted, but they were in both games on the road. They're going to be home in front of rabid fans. It's going to be tough as hell dealing with the crowd noise. You better realize that the 49ers are going to bring their A game. And if you think that, anything differently, you're in for a rude awakening is the way I look at it as a guy that played. I mean, you got to go in there and bring your best because the 49ers, I can't believe, Larry, 7 all-pros on their 22-man roster, 4 on offense, 3 on defense, 7 all-pros. That's a dominant football team, and they look like a juggernaut the first 5 games of the season. They're scoring 30 points rolling out of bed. I'm like, my God, is anybody going to be able to compete with them? Amazing.
Well, I'll tell you the one thing, though, it has distorted what I think has just been kind of a mediocre run defense because they have scored so many points on offense. They've taken the run game away that way. And if you can run the ball on the 49ers, if you look at the numbers, anybody could look at those stats and say, hey, the Niners are going to be able to run the ball. Niners are going to be able to stop the run. So the Niners are going to win the game. But I don't know that the Niners can stop the run. That to me is TBD. Let's flip the card and talk a little bit about the Bengals on the defensive side of the ball. I saw some of that. I watched the condensed version of Seattle and Cincinnati in their last game. And, man, 4 sacks, 13 hits on the quarterback, 8 tackles for loss. They were getting after it. Tell me what you think of this Bengals defense.
It's well coordinated by Lou Anarumo, Larry. Lou Anarumo is one of these guys that has just a great mind for football. He's like the mad scientist in the lab, putting together these incredible game plans. The 49ers have some positionless players, offensively and defensively, particularly offensively. The Bengals have quite a few positionless players, defensively. I remember back in the day, Paul Brown as the head coach, Bill Walsh as the offensive coordinator, then Lindy Infante, after him as a coordinator. Those guys were great at, okay, we had concepts, then we'd have different personnel groupings, different formations, motion, shifts, all that, but run the same thing and give the defense different looks, but run the same concept of plays, just a few concepts. Well, now with positionless players, it makes it even tougher to defend in the National Football League. Well, Lou Anarumo's matching that with positionless players, and he's got defensive ends dropping into coverage, not just zone blitz stuff. I mean, he's got Sam Hubbard lining up sometimes as an off-the-ball linebacker, and then he's blitzing Dax Hill and at safety. I mean, and what you see pre-snap is a far cry from what you're going to see post-snap, and disguises so well. I mean, it's that defense is very talented, and they're fast. They've got at least 3 guys in the secondary that can run under 4.3. 4.340. So I mean, they have a lot of speed. They play fast. The young guys are seeing it and going. In the beginning of the season, it was like not quite sure, so they were kind of taking away their advantage with that uncertainty. Now they're flying to the football, I think, a lot better. And the H boys up front, Hendrickson, Hubbard, and Hill, they've done a heck of a job pressuring the quarterback, and they do a good job, Larry, of staying in their rush lanes. And now, the defensive ends keep the width of the pocket. The defensive tackles don't let the quarterback climb the pocket, and eventually, somebody makes a play on the quarterback. So their red zone defense against Seattle was extraordinary. Nothing short of that. I mean, they had an interception in the red zone, in the low red zone. They stopped Seattle twice on downs. So 5 possessions in the red zone, 4 of them in the second half, field goal on 1, and no points on 3 red zone possessions by the Seattle Seahawks, and that won the football game.
Wow. David, I'm going to share the screen here. This is the 49ers offensive line coach. I was down in Santa Clara yesterday, and I asked him about the Bengals defensive front because it's Chris Forster.
Yes.
Listen to what he had to say. How about Cincy's line? I mean, Reader's a load, and the ends are both real active. Compared to other teams you guys have played, do they play a lot of games up front? Do they? What stands out when you watch the film on the Bengals D-line?
Bengals defense, from the pass rush standpoint, is the 2 ends with great effort. I mean, 91 is a great effort. He's a great bull rusher. He's a great edge rusher. He plays with outstanding energy and effort. He's got a great get off the ball, which is a pretty consistent theme of all good rushers. They get off on the snap, whether you see them at their home stadium, where they're having the advantage of the team in silent count, or whether they're at your place. They just have great get off. They study the film. Myles Garrett was a guy with great get off. That's part of his game, where he's a half a step ahead of you before you even can get out of your stance. Both those guys, and then the guy Hubbard on the other side, he gave us fits when we played there a couple of years ago with Compton. He got after us really good. We had to help over there and do some things to stay in that game at the end. And both those guys, inside players, are good, solid rushers. They have a very, very solid, good rush plan, whether it be their different double-A gaps, the fronts that they get, and things like that on third down games, pressures. It's very well thought out, very well coached. So you not only have good players doing it, you've got a really good scheme to go with it.
There you go. A little bit of Chris Forster. And I enjoy talking to Forster because you get to talk to some of these assistant coaches. They really give you a little insight.
Yeah.
There may not be Trent Williams in this game. It may be Jalen Moore at left tackle. He stood up nicely last week against Minnesota on that fast carpet up there. Who is the best player on that front four for Cincinnati in your mind, Dave?
I think that Coach Forster hit it on the head with Trey Hendrickson. He's a guy that can come off the edge really hard. He's got really good hands. He's underrated, I think, setting the edge in the running game. He turns things back inside with regularity. I mean, he's a very, very physical presence. He's got 7 quarterback sacks, which is amongst the league leaders. I think he's tied for 4th at this point, and he's a game behind some of the guys that are ahead of him in terms of games played. He's had at least 3, maybe 3.5 sacks nullified by penalty, and he's not happy about that because if all of those stood, he'd have 10.5 sacks and be leading the NFL. He is an effort, energy guy like Coach talks about, and Sam Hubbard the same way. Energizer bunny. I mean, this guy played locally in Cincinnati at Moeller High School, was a safety, goes to Ohio State. They start beefing him up. He's a linebacker. They beef him up more. He's a defensive end. Now he's in the NFL with that type of athleticism. I mean, he was a sophomore in high school playing safety at Moeller High School. So he's got, a skill set and athleticism to him. And I think DJ Reader is an underrated guy in the league, man. He's a thumper inside in terms of you're not going to knock him off the ball. You're not going to he'll knock you back before you knock him back. He's that kind of guy, and he pushes the pocket and stays in a good rush lane as a pass rusher.
Is Miles Murphy part of their, the rookie from Clemson? I mean, what a talent, that size, that speed, but this is a tough line to break into.
I agree. I think, he's they're not dissatisfied with him. They like his athleticism. They like the way he's developing, and he is in rotation, but the rotation is not, a 50-50 rotation. He's got to earn more of more snaps in that rotation. and really the guys ahead of him are just playing at a pretty high level. But they're not the least bit disappointed in him. And you're right. I mean, he's a 270-pound guy that was running like high 4.6s. It was crazy.
Niners badly wanted Cam Taylor-Britt, and the Bengals took him one pick in front of them in the 2022 draft, I think in the second round.
Yep.
Taylor-Britt's real. Huh? I mean, number 29, he's one of those guys that runs exceptionally well, but he really knows how to play. Real foundation piece, huh?
He is. And I'll tell you, he's a physical kid now. I mean, he got in DK Metcalf's head in the Seattle game. And DK Metcalf lost his composure and, took a shot at him and got a 15-yard penalty as a result of it. And in that, the 2 interceptions for Cam Taylor-Britt this season. He's one of 3 Bengals that have 2 interceptions, and 49ers only team that has 4 different guys with 2 interceptions. But Cam Taylor-Britt has a pick 6, 11 yards out for a touchdown. His other interception, he picks it off against Seattle, gets up, returns it 24 yards. Offense goes 3 and out, 3 straight incompletions. But McPherson hits a 52-yard field goal because he got up and, gave him 2.5 first downs the offense didn't have to worry about. So Cam Taylor-Britt has had an impact, on multiple football games already this year. And for the first 2 years of his career, he loves football. He's a big energy guy. I mean, he brings the juice. There's no question.
Dave, how many concussions did you have in your career, diagnosed versus actual in your mind?
That's a good question. I was just talking about that today with guys. Guys were asking. It's like, I can remember so many times, we used to call it, you got rung, you get your bell rung,
Right.
And it's like, there's a long distance call and nobody's answering the phone, you're ringing away, it's like, you get that ring going. And I remember playing through those a lot, and it's like,
wait, there was no protocol? You weren't in the protocol?
Yeah,
you weren't in the protocol?
Yeah, the coach would, the trainer would come over and, how many fingers do I have up? And if you said 3 instead of 2, he'd stick the other one up there. It's like, and he'd ask you your name, and if you could say at least your first name or at least your last name, you passed, man. You were back in the game, and you go running back in there, and you'd be serpentine into the huddle. You couldn't even run in a straight line. I mean, it was crazy. And I thought about that, and now with all the studies they've done and everything, I'm wondering when it's going to happen where it's like, oh boy. All these hits, man, it took its toll.
Brock Purdy has not yet been cleared through the concussion protocol. There's a realistic chance that he could go. He went into the protocol early Tuesday, felt symptoms on the plane ride back from Minneapolis. He's passed 4 of the league's 5 steps in the concussion protocol, so he was allowed to participate in a practice on a limited basis yesterday and was a full go today. He's listed as questionable. The final step of the concussion protocol requires him to be cleared for full contact by the Niners team physician and then be examined by an independent neurological consultant. And if that consultant agrees with the physician that he's okay, then he can play against the Bengals. He suffered the injury, it looked like on a quarterback sneak on Monday night. Give me your perspective on Brock Purdy and what you're seeing from afar. I mean, this kid's a great story, Mr. Irrelevant, and he's taken the league by storm. He's 10-2. He can process what he sees. What do you see?
Yeah, I think you hit it right there, Larry. Can process what he sees and does it quickly. I mean, he's one of those guys that he's a quick read, and the ball is out. And I'm very impressed with him. And he'd be the first guy to come back from concussion protocol in a short week.
Right.
That doesn't happen very often. But if he just kind of felt symptoms after flying back, and that's understandable. So maybe it was just very minor. I don't know. I know there's levels and degrees of concussion. They are careful about that. They do want to make sure that they take care of the players in terms of head and brain injuries and that kind of thing. So I don't know if it's a slam dunk that he's going to pass, but it kind of seems like it's trending that way. And I would be kind of surprised if he doesn't play. And I'm very impressed with him. I mean, I think he puts the ball in very good places. He has had some inaccuracy issues compared to his other games the last couple of games that they've lost. He hasn't been quite as accurate with the football, but boy, he puts it in tight spots on time. And as a former lineman, you love a guy like that. And he hasn't lost at home, right? Isn't he 8-0 at home?
I believe so. Yeah.
In the games. So, that's something that they can hang their hat on a little bit as well. And what a great story, though, to be the last pick in the draft. Just goes to show you don't have to have a howitzer for an arm, but you have to have enough of an arm to get there in a timely fashion. But the biggest thing is accuracy and don't put the ball in harm's way. That's the big deal.
Yeah. I mean, requisite arm strength is what you need to play in the NFL. But what you really need is you got to process what you see pre-snap. The ball's got to come out on time, and it's got to be accurate. It's a league that there's a premium put on accuracy. I remember Steve Young told me a few years ago, in college, everybody was open. In the pros, nobody's open. And you almost have to throw them open. So you have to kind of understand the coverages and where the soft spots are and where you can lead receivers to. And it's a totally different game. Dave,
real quick, Larry, one thing that impressed me about that, man, when I was doing some research, I saw where 52.6% of the receiving yards of the 49ers this year are yards after catch, leads the NFL. Why is that? Because Shanahan's schematic gets them so open. I mean, I'm watching tape and guys are like, I can't believe how open they are. Like you said, in the NFL, you're not open, big time. But periodically, from a scheme standpoint, man, Shanahan's game plans guys wide open. And it kind of confirmed that in my mind when I was over half of the yards are after the catch. I mean, I know guys are making people miss tackles, but sometimes it's a few yards before they have to even encounter that first tackle. It's a hell of a deal he has going there. And like you talk about with the quarterback, he's got executing it, man. That's big time.
Two last ones. I think you probably played with Ike Curtis, right? And you played with Collinsworth, and you're now watching Chase. Higgins is not a whole lot worse. Where does Chase sit in the greatest Bengal receivers of all time? Is he on the top of the heap? Would you put Curtis above him? Where's Collinsworth on that list? There's probably a few guys I'm missing out on. Carl Pickens was a hell of a player for years and years. You've seen a bunch of them. Where does Chase sit with them?
Yeah, Chase is in a very unique and fortunate situation in that the quarterback he's playing with, they made beautiful music together in college together. And Joe Burrow won a Heisman Trophy with Jamar Chase as his primary target, and they won a national championship. So the other guys you're talking about didn't have that advantage of, during the college career, I've already got all this timing and all this rhythm and everything set up with this guy. And this guy's a great quarterback. And all the guys you talk about as Bengal receivers, Isaac Curtis had Kenny Anderson, Chris Collinsworth had Kenny Anderson and Boomer Esiason. So you have to have somebody to get him the football. And Joe Burrow is getting Jamar Chase the football, big time. The thing that separates Jamar Chase from the other guys, Isaac Curtis was an Olympic sprinter, literally, made the Olympic team as a sprinter hurdler. Chris Collinsworth was a Florida high school state champion in the 100-yard dash, 100-meter dash back then. I mean, you get, and he's long and lanky, can run. Jamar Chase is like 6 feet tall, 210, 215 pounds, stacked, weight room stacked. He's like a running back. I mean, he's put together. He's got a different body type than those guys. He can run like those guys, but man, he is put together so differently in terms of seeing those guys in the locker room. It's like, boy, they don't come, they come in all shapes and sizes. There's no question about that. There's no uniform deal other than the fact that you got to have a good quarterback to get you the rock.
Last one, trade deadline's coming up after this game. There's been a lot of talk about T. Higgins moving. Are the Bengals going to add? Are they going to subtract? Could you see them move off of T. Higgins? And if not, do you think they will try to add to this thing? Because I kind of thought of them as on the select group of Super Bowl contenders in that AFC coming into the year. They got off to the slow start, and now nobody's really talking about them, but they still got a pretty stacked team on both sides of the ball. It wouldn't surprise me if they went on a late run. Will they be active at the trade deadline?
That's a good question, Larry. Historically, they haven't been. And you know how it is. Everybody does their due diligence. The Bengals, one thing on the bye week, Duke Tobin and his player personnel, staff, they were, I'm sure, doing their due diligence on the rumors, who is available, what might it take. If we do get a phone call, we don't want to be unprepared to at least talk with what these teams are reaching out about. I don't anticipate the Bengals making a whole lot of calls, but you always pick up the phone and listen. But the odds and percentages of trade, the amount of phone calls that are taking place now and up until Tuesday, and the amount of deals, the percentage of deals that are going to come as a result of all that probing and reaching out and all that is minor, very small. Although there were 10 trades made on the final day last year, on the final trade deadline day, I don't anticipate that necessarily happening this year because, Larry, you got salary cap issues to work out. You got compensation. We'll give you a third. No, that's too rich. I mean, it's like so many things have to fall into place to get these deals done. I'd be interested to hear how many deals are done with respect to how many things are talked about with 32 teams around the NFL.
Yeah, it's a hell of a point. Dave, safe travels out here. I'll be at the game Sunday. If I see you in the press box, I'll come over and shake hands and say hello. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and wish you nothing but success in your broadcast career going forward. And thanks for stopping by on the Krug Show and giving us some insight on the Bengals, talking old school ball and previewing this matchup. The audience really enjoyed it thoroughly, and I did as well. And thanks again.
Sure, Larry. I mean, it was great. Really appreciate the opportunity. Your football. Love talking football with guys like you, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit. It was a blast.